Welcome, everyone. We're excited to see such a wonderful turnout on such a very wet evening. I just wanted to say that Jonathan Katz inspired the Media and Journalism Initiative at the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute. It's an initiative that is dedicated to helping newsmakers and news consumers make more educated choices about what we read, what we post, at a critical moment in our democracy. And of course, tonight's event is about just that. It contributes to the FHI's broader efforts to engage with contemporary transformations in research, teaching, and publishing in the humanities and allied interdisciplinary fields. We're working on this initiative with the DeWitt Wallace Center for Media and Democracy, which, as you know, is Duke University's hub for the study of journalism. Founded in 1973, the center is part of the Sanford School of Public Policy and shares in the school's mission of teaching, research, and policy engagement with the goal of putting knowledge in the service of society. Let me tell you more about Jonathan Katz, who he is a regular New York Times contributor covering local, national, and international affairs. His work has been featured in dozens of other publications, including Slate, The New Republic, Politico Magazine, and The New Yorker. He spent 7 years as an Associated Press correspondent, where he reported from more than a dozen countries and territories, including Haiti, where he was the only full-time foreign correspondent stationed at the time of the catastrophic January 12, 2010 earthquake. Jonathan's book, The Big Truck That Went By, How the World Came to Save Haiti and Left Behind a Disaster, was a Penn Literary Award finalist and won the Overseas Press Club of America's Cornelius Ryan Award for the year's best book on international affairs. Jonathan lectures in journalism at the DeWitt Wallace Center and teaches courses on journalism. So Jonathan will now introduce our guests, Matt and Adam, and thank you.
Your bios will be long, right? You can't possibly. So, thank you guys for coming here. Thank you all for swimming or boating here today, or however you arrived. I'm going to introduce Matt and Adam, and then we're going to jump into what I think is going to be a pretty cool conversation here. Matt Apuzzo has covered law enforcement and security matters for more than a decade. He joined the New York Times in 2014 as an investigative reporter. Before that, Matt spent 11 years with the Associated Press, covering such stories as the trial of Bush White House aide Scooter Libby, the Blackwater shootings in Iraq, the FBI investigation into then Senator Ted Stevens. He got his start, students, covering police and organized crime for the New Bedford, Massachusetts Standard Times, in addition to his work at the New York Times. He teaches journalism at Georgetown University, and once, according to him, successfully argued a motion from the audience in federal court. Adam Goldman joined the Times in August 2016, focusing on the FBI and national security. He previously covered terrorism and national security for the Washington Post. Adam was on the Associated Press investigative team with Matt in Washington, D.C., where he also focused on national security. Before that, he worked in New York and Las Vegas for the Associated Press and newspapers in Virginia and Alabama. And actually, I think we met for the first time when you were a young reporter covering the World Series of Poker, and I was an even younger reporter who had lied my way into a press credential just to see the World Series of Poker. Adam is a graduate of the University of Maryland. But of course, I'm bearing the lead a little bit here because as a team, greater than the sum of their individual parts, great as those parts may be, Adam and Matt have been the together recipient of many journalism awards, most notably the 2012 Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting, which they won for their spotlighting of the New York Police Department's clandestine spying program that monitored daily life in Muslim communities, resulting in congressional calls for a federal investigation and a debate over the proper role of domestic intelligence gathering. So thanks for clearing that up. We don't have to worry about it. They also won the Goldman Prize for investigative reporting and the George Polk Award. Together, they are the co-authors the excellent Enemies Within, Inside the NYPD's Secret Spying Unit and Bin Laden's Final Plot Against America, available in fine bookstores everywhere. They've been extremely busy of late, covering the unending Jean Le Carré novel that is now American political life. Their bylines have been on some of the biggest political stories of the last year, including, as you may have seen, yesterday's blockbuster result of a months-long investigation into the FBI director, which took the coveted top right-hand corner position, I believe, on the front page of the Sunday Times headline, "Comey tried to shield the FBI from politics, then he shaped an election." We will be talking about that. They both live with their respective families in Washington, D.C., across the street from each other, but that, at least according to Adam, is just so welcome to Duke. Thank you guys for coming here.
Happy to be here.
So let's start off by talking about how you guys got into one of the most coveted positions in journalism. What was your path into the New York Times, and how did you get into investigative journalism?
Adam and I were both at the AP at the end of 2012, and Adam got approached for a job at the Post, and ended up taking it. And I knew I wanted to do something different, and wasn't quite sure, what that was going to be. I thought maybe go overseas, maybe go cover business or something. And the Times approached me about covering the Justice Department, which I didn't love the idea because I felt like I'd sort of done that already. But they pitched it as a very, investigative, heavy job, and they didn't want me to sort of lost in the nitty-gritty, and that was attractive. And the Times has really great editors, which is something I was attracted to. And so there was no application process. It was just sort of like I had a cup of coffee, and then it was like, well, would you like to continue this conversation? I was like, sure. And they said, well, could you come to New York and talk to some folks up there about it? And like kind of only when I got there did I realize that the conversation was going to be like a battery of interviews. And like in my third interview, somebody was like, "Why do you think you want to come and work for it? Why do you think you want to come and work for the Times?" And I said, "I don't know if I do." And they were like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, not to sound like a jerk, but you called me. Like I don't know. Like I have a really good job. Maybe I don't." So we had a little bit of miscommunication there. I thought I was interviewing them, but it worked out nonetheless.
How about you?
Well, I was at the Washington Post, and I was in the warm embrace of a billionaire, Jeff Bezos. The future of that paper is secure, as long as he's interested in journalism. And one day, I got an email from the Times, from Dean Beckay, said, "Are you free? Would you like to meet?" So I just went up to the Times and had a 30-minute conversation with Dean Beckay and another individual, Matt Hardy. And we talked a little bit, and they said, "How do you think you do with the Post?" I said, "I'm doing pretty good. I probably could do better." He said, "You're probably right." And I didn't hear anything for months and months and months and months and months. 8 months later, I got an email at 11 p.m. from the Washington bureau chief. She said, "Can you have lunch tomorrow?" And I was like, "Okay." And she's having a seafood salad, and I'm having a seafood salad. And she says, "So, do you want to work at the Times?" And I said, "Are you offering me a job?" And she said, "Yeah." And she's like, when can you tell us?" And I said, "Can I have a night to think about it, or a few days?" And that was my ascent to the Times.
We've got hiring pretty much down to the science. As you can tell.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some old business first. The stories that you guys did, which were incredible, about the NYPD's spying on Muslim communities, got a lot of attention, I think, at the time. And I'm wondering what you guys, if you could talk a little bit about the process of writing those stories and what you think the outcome of that has been now that we're looking back, 5, 6, 7 years later. what's changed and what's left.
I'll do the process, you do that. There you go. The reporting on the NYPD and its relationship with the CIA post 9/11 was an interesting one. We were investigative reporters in Washington, D.C. Why are we reporting on the New York City Police Department? We started learning things about what the NYPD was doing based on our contacts with people who had worked at the CIA, who were bragging about these programs they set up in New York to spy essentially on Muslim Americans, right? To literally infiltrate their neighborhoods, right? Their businesses, where they slept, where they ate. They were counting Qurans. They were monitoring who was watching Al Jazeera in cafes. And they were literally mapping the Muslim human terrain in New York. And for me, as we began reporting on that and gathering more information, it was extraordinary that something like this had basically been going on since 2003, and this is circa 2010 and 11. None of the media had reported on this, and we didn't understand why. Why hadn't the media reported on this? So we dug in and we learned a ton about what was going on. We met people, they told us, and made sources, and eventually we ran a story. The NYPD lied. They said it's not true. What you're reporting is fiction. That was the quote in our very first story. And then people within the NYPD who we worked with started leaking documents to us. In fact, allowing us to prove it was true. And they were doing everything that we reported to them. They were doing everything we had actually reported. And I think what was really surprising about the process is the intense pushback we got from people, from other journalists, right, who weren't willing to dig in and build on what we had done. Because a lot of times that's what happens in national security reporting. You break a story and other reporters jump in and they build on that work. Everything that, whether it's black sites overseas or other issues involving national security. And we found people weren't willing to do that. And suddenly we found that newspapers in New York were editorializing against us. The Daily News, the New York Post, the conservative blogs. It was just enormous pushback. I thought we were doing the right thing by reporting this. And it was a real lesson in this. And but it invigorated us and it made us want to dig deeper and harder into what was actually happening in New York City. Because it was clear the media there wasn't going to jump in. And so then something really interesting happened. We were able to take the NYPD spying programs out of New York and we put them in New Jersey. We found they were doing similar things in Newark, New Jersey and other places. And the New Jersey media was like, hey, this is interesting. We're going to report on this. And Governor Christie, at least back then, was like, hey, you don't get to spy on our Muslims and not tell us about it. And this built a certain amount of momentum within our reporting.
Can I add one thing? We had reported a lot about how the NYPD was sending officers and informants to Muslim student associations on campuses, Queens College and CUNY schools, and we thought that was a pretty amazing story, and it got like no traction, zero interest. We reported a couple months later that the NYPD was monitoring listservs and websites and public postings on the Muslim Student Association websites, which are much more public, of Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, right? And then suddenly there's outrage, right? Like, we have no problem if you're infiltrating the actual campus of these, working class kids. But how dare you even read the websites of Columbia University and NYU? That is, a bridge too far. And then people are upset. So there was a real, I think we saw that there was a class issue going on there as well, not just a religious issue.
And just the end that, just the end this line thinking, when, I guess I had always thought when you're young and that when you win the Pulitzer it was going to be real clean, right? Like you've done great and everybody's going to rally around you. But it's all very black and white, right? It's like, Deep Throat, Watergate, and everybody loves you for reporting this. But at the end, it wasn't like that. I mean, there are still people who think that we shouldn't have reported what we reported on the NYPD, and in fact, somehow we made the city less safe and the sky was going to fall. So it wasn't a clean ending for us, even though we won the ultimate prize.
Yeah, so what have the effects of your story been since?
Well, so the Muslim spying program and the stop and frisk program led ultimately to the creation of the NYPD's first Inspector General. For the first time, somebody from outside the police department was actually allowed to look at the files of the police department. The city just settled a lawsuit which admitted no wrongdoing, but promised to reinstated some civilian oversight inside the intelligence division with sort of a whistleblowing function, the ability, if I see something that just goes off the rails, I can go to a federal judge. And the one of the units we reported on, the demographics unit, this is the plainclothes officers just sort of hung out in the neighborhood, eavesdropping on conversations in Muslim neighborhoods and putting people in files. That got disbanded, and they now are sort of promising to hew closer to the rules that were set up. So in a lot of ways, there's been a lot of real substantive change. To your point, we are still living in an era where law enforcement and intelligence services have more power than they ever have before. So it's, if I were a Muslim in New York City attending attending a prayer session in a mosque, I wouldn't have more comfort today than I did 5 years ago that there wasn't a police officer hanging out there. But I think I do have more confidence that the work of those undercovers is being more closely scrutinized and there is some greater degree of oversight. But for the longest time, the reaction among the city was, yeah, we spied on Muslims. You're welcome, New York.
Yeah, New Yorkers are like, let's do more of it.
Great, fantastic. Let's do more of it. So it is interesting, in this the most cosmopolitan, diverse city in the country and the sort of liberal bastion of whatever, the response was, I'm glad they're doing that. And we would go to do these events and we would talk about the work we were doing, and people would come up and they'd say, look, I get that that maybe they're not doing anything wrong, but I still feel like I just feel safer knowing that this is going on. And I said, well, would it make you feel, would you feel any different if I told you that there was absolutely no evidence that it was working? It was just extremely invasive, but not working. He's like, yeah, no, that wouldn't change it. And I said, look, at least you're honest, right? At least you're honest.
So let's talk a little bit about what you guys have been doing more recently. How did you make the transition to doing the kind of reporting on the intelligence community? Euphemistic word that I keep trying to avoid using in my own mind. How did you start reporting on spies and counter spies? And when did that start for you, and how has that changed over the last couple?
Well, Adam was doing. I had been, when we were at the AP, I had been doing DOJ and FBI stuff, and Adam had been doing more CIA stuff, kind of on the side, like as a hobby, while he was in New York. And then when he moved to DC, we kind of just sort of merged our Rolodex a little bit organically. And he taught me a lot about the spy world, and I sort of tried to introduce him to the FBI world and the DOJ world, and
the law.
And the law. And it's the CIA guys whose job is to break the law. They don't care about So I think it started back then. And Adam's been staying with it. I've sort of meandered in and out more. But what an interesting thing is, before 9/11, if you were covering national security and you were covering intelligence, you were covering the sort of spy versus spy counterintelligence game. You were covering sort of Russian espionage. You were covering all of this sort of intrigue, whatever. Like counterterrorism was sort of a dud storyline pre-9/11, and it was a really niche thing. And then after 9/11, just like the government, all of the reporting, all of national security reporting, sort of ran at the bright shiny thing of counterterrorism. And there, people weren't as well sourced, and people, ourselves included, weren't as well sourced and didn't have the greater degree of familiarity with the counterintelligence world, the sort of spy chasers, as we did with the counterterrorism world. So I think, working with people like Adam, who actually had institutional knowledge in the CIA, and our boss, Mark Mazzetti, who was very recently a reporter covering this stuff, I think gives us a little bit of a leg up. But it's a challenge. I mean, it's the most secretive aspect of the most secretive beat. And it's something that we haven't been spending years working on, and is the most competitive story in the country, and with extremely high stakes. So it's stressful, and it's the most difficult thing I've done.
Without a doubt, that I was focused on counterterrorism for many years, right? If there's a terrorism attack in the United States, your editors want to know what happened, right? So you're building a Rolodex to deal with a terrorist attack. You're learning about every Abu Jihad who was involved in terrorism overseas, and that was the focus. And meanwhile, there's this whole other world, right? There are all these other secret spy wars going on, right? Remember the sleeper, the Russians who were here? They kicked them out in 2010. These I don't know, these sleeper agents.
It
wasn't clear.
Became basis for the show The Americans.
Yeah, it became the basis to show The Americans. So there's whole world going on, this whole underworld here, and we weren't really. I mean, I would every now and then, the media now and then dips into it. There's a big thing like the sleepers, you got a Hansen, you got Ames, right? These sort of major spy stories. But they're really hard things
Hansen
to write.
and Ames are CIA and FBI officers who turned out to have been Russian spies.
So I myself have been doing some pivoting, and refocusing my energies on trying to understand what triggers a counterintelligence investigation in terms of what triggers a counterterrorism investigation. And there are while the rules are the same, there are distinctions. And I found that facts are elusive. This is a gray world, and it's not even clear that the people who the spy hunters here in the United States or overseas are even clear about what they're hearing. Imagine this scenario, right? Imagine the government's listening to a Russian intelligence officer tell his boss, "I've recruited this American," right? I've recruited this American here. I'm not going to say whether it's part of the campaign or not. And that gets written up, and that gets put in a report, right? And sent back to Russian, the Moscow Center, right? And so the Americans are listening to that, right? But how can they be sure that's even true? Because the Russians are no different than Americans working in the CIA or FBI who tell their bosses, "Oh yeah, I've got that guy. I got a good source, right? I've made a good source." Or reporters who go to their editors, "Oh, don't worry, I've got a good source," right? And they're listening to that, and there's no way to actually verify it.
And the Russians probably know they're listening to, so they're spinning. They're trying to put people up. So what is what is knowledge in fact in this world is tough. To say we know somebody was recruited or somebody was approached or somebody was working with the Russians, the level of proof. I mean, is it enough to say that the American intelligence agencies believe that? It's very complicated. It's we spend a huge amount of time inside the Times just sort of wringing our hands about how much confirmation is confirmation.
This story is littered with reporting landmines. I've never seen so many landmines. And you can't afford to step on one.
So you guys must just be laughing at all the other reporters who are like, "We're encountering all these new questions of what is truth, and are people trying to lie to us or not?" We're like babies. So how has this changed over the course of the last couple of months that feel like they've been a decade or more? I mean, we're not even at 100 days yet of this new president.
Artificial. 100 days.
Yeah.
Artificial. It's got to slow down, right?
It slowed down. Slow down.
The pace there for a while was exhausting. We were working all day. We were working 7 days a week. We were working nights. It was not a pace that could continue.
when we were already on an unsustainable pace prior to election, I mean, I started the Times. I walked into a terrorism attack in Chelsea, right? There's no, nothing. Well, I didn't actually walk into the attack, but I started the Times. There's a terrorist attack in Chelsea. You can imagine a terrorism attack in Chelsea means a lot to the New York Times, right? And then Comey sends the letter. That upends our world. I mean, I remember it was 14 days straight, all day. That was unrelenting, and then the election happened, and we're just in full crisis mode.
And to give you a sense of like the expectations game at the time, so Comey sent the letter on a Friday, and so Friday afternoon we've got this story out, and they said, what we'd really like to do is do it like a comprehensive TikTok,
the definitive
TikTok on exactly what happened for Sunday, right? The story that we wrote this Sunday, just this Sunday, that went over like 8,000 words.
They wanted it.
They wanted that, like, could we do that for this Sunday?
And we were like, wait, no. I think we need some time.
Yeah, so it became like that Comey story became sort of something like a running joke. Like they want another Comey story. They want the Comey story. But that Comey story wasn't ready, so we said, well, they want a Comey story, so give him a story about Comey to like make him go away. While we had to just keep reporting out that one, which took 4 months. So
and that originally started as a Hillary narrative. What happened, but we realized that we couldn't. Russia was in the news. People now want to know how he handled. It even seemed more pressing how he handled the Russia investigation. So ultimately, we decided we had to braid these two narratives to explain his decision making.
Let's talk about that though, because before you get to the story that was originally assigned for that Sunday and now finally ran this Sunday, October.
We got around.
Yeah.
Took a little while.
And it was excellent. I was thinking about introducing it as your second book. It's a very good story. I actually read the whole thing. October 28th, 2016, right? Probably one of the most famous front pages in the New York Times, at least among people who are alive right now. There's a story I clipped the top of in my notes here. The presidential campaign was rocked on Friday after federal law enforcement officials said that emails pertinent to the closed investigation into Hillary Clinton's I don't know if anybody's getting like PTSD from me. Into Hillary Clinton's private email server were discovered on a computer belonging to Anthony D. Weiner, the estranged husband of a top Clinton aide. In a letter to Congress, the FBI director, James B. Comey, said the emails had surfaced in an unrelated case. That was a story called Emails and Anthony Weiner Inquiry Jolt Hillary Clinton's Campaign by Adam Goldman and Alan Rappaport. So there has been a lot of discussion and a lot of hand-wringing over the news decisions that were made to give those stories the kind of play that they got.
So, funny story about that. It's Friday.
Right, let me start it because it doesn't get to you.
No, but I feel like I need this to be in the prism of the insanity of my life. That Friday I took the day off, and I took my 7-year-old son. We live in Washington, and I took my 7-year-old son to New York City for the day to do all the touristy things. We were going to stay to spend the night, do the whole thing. And so we took him to the top of the Empire State Building, and at the top of the Empire State Building, I get a phone call from Adam Goldman. And I have been seeing while we're waiting in line that Comey sent this letter, and I'm responding to emails, and we're in the, oh my God, blah, blah. And he says, I'm like 80% sure this is coming from Anthony Weiner's computer. And I was like, oh my God, you're fucking kidding me. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, like, the guy told me that there was a chance this might happen, and yada yada yada, and like I got a source that says it's not wrong. We need a second source, blah blah. You got to make calls on it. And then I was like, all right, I will make calls on it. And then we're coming down the elevator, and my boss calls and said, "Have you talked to Goldman?" I was like, "Yes, I'm working on it." And so then I tell my 7-year-old, I was like, "You want to see the New York Times building? Come see where Dad works." So we go to the New York Times, and I'm like working the phones as I'm walking through, and like all these editors like descend on me. They're like, "We need a second source. We need a second source." And so, while we're there, like, I get the second source, and like, my boss pulls me into like a room, and Goldman's on a conference call with the editors, and they're like, Apuzzo's got a second source, and then we do like a, here's my guy, here's your guy, okay, we're not talking about the same person, yes, this is this, blah, blah, blah. And one of the editors takes my 7-year-old and goes, you want to see the vending machines? So like they sit me down at a computer, and everybody's just a sentence, just write a sentence. Fucking Anthony Weiner's computer, right? It was like, and there's just file it, right? There's like boom, and like I turn around and there's my kid with a Coca-Cola. He's not getting to drink Coca-Cola and a giant bag of Cheetos, and he's like happy as a clam. And so then he's like, 10 seconds later, he's like, Dad, they're talking about the New York Times on television. And I was like, yeah, I know. He's like, no, all the televisions. So he spent 3.5 hours of our day in our special Father and Sunday. So, we talk about Jim Comey ruining the campaign. Jim Comey ruined my day with my kid.
I don't know, man. The Times has excellent vending machines. Not worse places in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. There's my story. You want to talk about, go with your media criticism now. I've humanized myself.
Power of narrative.
Yeah.
All right, so you actually have your name at the top of that one.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I guess it was around late August, I was having, the Weiner story had broken, right? That he was accused of sending these illicit messages to this 50-year-old in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was just having coffee with somebody, and he said, I said, what's going on with Weiner? So, yeah, we're going to get a warrant for his laptop. He's like, that's going to be a headache. And I was like, this is in August. And we reported this. It was late August. Yeah. Was it?
No.
It was late September. Late September, because I was up in, it was late September. And I had reported some of these details, so I'm not totally talking out of school. So, and I said, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I sort of filed it away, right? Thought I would come back to it because he had said, yeah, we could find potentially Umlaut emails on this computer. And then when Comey sent his letter, I knew instantly that they had found those emails on, and I called the person. And I was like, what happened? He's like, yeah, it's true. And then set off that frantic, logo, right? Like, oh, that.
So what's your role as a journalist? I mean, I think that I guess there's no such thing as no uncertain terms anymore, especially if you're talking about Nate Silver's estimations of how things worked out. But in highly probabilistic terms, that story at the top of a mountain, but that story in particular may have swung the entire, no pressure, but it may have swung the entire election, possibly the fate of humanity.
So I guess I would just put it this way, did that story do it? Or how far, where do you want to go on the line, right? Like, did us covering the letter do it? Did the letter do it? Right? Did the investigation do it? Did the press conference do it? Did the fact that this woman knew she was going to run for president and set up a private server in her house do it? Right? Like, what did it?
With the help of her top aides.
Right. So what did it? And I think that 11 days before the election, the director of the FBI notifies Congress that they've essentially reopened an investigation into the frontrunner for president. If we don't go big with that on the front page, we just go home and write. We should just start writing in our diaries, man. Because that's what's a bigger news story than that? Now, I actually do think that our coverage, and I say our coverage meaning the coverage that Adam and I and Mike Schmidt and Willie Rashbaum did over the ensuing 14 days, said over and over again that the chances of them finding anything in these emails that would actually change the outcome is essentially zero. But the FBI has put the cloud of a federal investigation over the Democratic frontrunner going into the election. Now, I get that there's some sort of uncertainty principle going on here, right? Like, if we don't write about it, is it not true? And right, I mean, well, there's only a cloud because the New York Times says there's a cloud, but I mean, come on. The FBI director announced they was reopening the investigation 11 days before the election. I don't know how that was a bombshell, like nobody has seen bombshells before. And I don't know that there's well, here's how you should have responded to it.
So when you find out about something like that, and I understand that generally speaking, it's up to editors, it's up to the way up the masthead. Dean McKay is basically making the call, right, on a story like that about who. Yeah.
I mean, about to write. Nobody was
not to write, but how it's going to play. Like whether you're going to play it huge on the front page, whether it's going to be.
Nobody's not going to lead the paper with that. Everybody led the paper with that.
That was on every single front page of every newspaper.
And we still think that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's news.
I mean, nothing like. We are talking about it today. Like we wrote 8,000 words about that thing on Sunday, which tells me that it's still one of the most.
I mean, we'll be talking about this 20, 30, 40 years from now.
I hope so.
What, like, that would be ridiculous if we didn't front this thing.
Well, so now we now know, and of course a lot of the things that we know about this came from your reporting as well, that this was not the only thing that was happening in Washington. This was not the only thing that was happening in James Comey's office at the time that you were reporting on this. So there is another presidential candidate who was running against Hillary Clinton at the time, what's his name? And he had an investigation going on into his activities as well. His campaign's activities, which were pretty explosive, amazing. I think these would be the front of all the front pages in the country.
Huge.
Get your kids some Cheetos news. Well,
what a good one.
And there was no inkling of that at the time. Were you hearing from your sources that this might be what was going on?
So there was an inkling, right? I mean, it was starting to trickle out that there was something going on. Remember, the Times did this huge investigation into Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign chairman, and the fact that he's mentioned in this ledger as having received all this money from the pro-Russian sort of Ukrainian party in Ukraine, and then the AP followed that up with the fact that there was this sort of shadow lobbying campaign going on for Manafort, and those two stories really drove Manafort out of the campaign.
But not because of Russian collusion, because of possible
the corruption. But it was Russia, and there was this rumor going around that that there was this secret computer back channel between Trump Tower and the KGB or the FSB in Moscow, which we spent real resources trying to run down and run down. I mean,
we didn't become aware. The two of us didn't become aware of this dossier until.
So I didn't know about the dossier until BuzzFeed ran.
Yeah.
Now, I'm to learn that there were people who were, at the Times, spending real resources trying to confirm information in that dossier. It had access to it. We weren't one of those people. So we ran down that whole computer thing that I think was it Salon or Slate did the big
this Alpha Bank turned out
and it turned out as nothing. Like so, we spent all these resources. I'm in it for the stories, man. Like, if I could break a story that's, in October that there's a Trump investigation involving collusion with Russian intelligence officers, put me down for that. I'll do it.
For me, we were also in the middle of, we were looking at Hillary Clinton's foundation, right? Because we knew that the FBI had opened a preliminary investigation into the foundation, but there wasn't a lot of smoke there. Right.
There was a lot of smoke.
There was a lot of smoke. There wasn't any fire, and I think I would say personally, I think I was distracted by that. But it seemed to be important. Why did it seem to be important? Because she was the front runner, and Trump was not going to win. So what is going on with this FBI investigation and the Hillary's Foundation? I think if I had known about that dossier earlier, and I know it was floating around, journalists had started to get it much earlier. I mean, I think journalists had it I mean, it was Yahoo, Mike Isikoff wrote about that dossier obliquely in September. So, and I think it was floating around the Post in August, though nobody told me about it.
And
as the FBI reporter, you think somebody would have told me about the freaking dossier, right? And nobody did.
And it was just a close hold. It was just a decision internally, to restrict who had that and what. But I mean, it's neither here nor there. I would have loved to have seen it. I would have loved to have done some reporting on it.
I mean, we're still reporting.
And we're still reporting.
We're still reporting on it.
Have you found the P-tape?
I've not found it.
Don't worry, we have.
I assume when you find the P-tape,
we're still efforting on the P-tape.
I mean, look, the thing is a certain amount of that stuff is the stuff in the dossier is like knowably true, like it is demonstrably true. A certain amount of that stuff is like there's as Rumsfeld, right? There's like you have your known unknowns and you have your unknown unknowns, right? So corroborating that stuff is a challenge, and as we understand it, it's a challenge for the FBI. And as we reported, the FBI told Michael Steele, the former MI6 guy who produced the dossier, he said, "Listen, this is all really interesting stuff. We'll actually pay you as a contractor $50,000 if you can corroborate this." And that never happened. And for any number of reasons, but it's hard. It's there
are things.
Do I wish we had done more? Like we had known that Trump and Russia was the story, and had put the level of resources we have on now. Then, of course.
Look, there are a couple of things I wish I had known. One of which is Carter Page, this foreign policy advisor you all have been reading about. The Russians tried to recruit him in 2013 in New York when they broke up this spy ring. I mean, that's an important fact, right? It's an important fact that Carter Page was recruited by Russian foreign intelligence, right? And he was made aware of that by the FBI. They interviewed him, they told him that, and he goes back to Moscow. Now, you can say that's okay, he's got business interests in Moscow, but it's an interesting data point. And there were a number of those data points that didn't come out later. And if we had acquired them earlier, it would have led me as a reporter to more forcefully think about, is there a broader investigation here? Is there a CI investigation, right? And I have to say, at the time, I wasn't necessarily thinking about that.
I was wondering if you guys put that detail about the $50,000 reward to run down whether the Steele dossier was, like, did you put that in your story as like a signal to everybody else that like our reporting is showing that this thing is?
No. It had been reported that there was that the FBI offered to pay him, and it was a little bit. I think it wasn't just like we'll pay you. It was we'll pay you for like corroborated info, not just like sort of working your sources. That's just in there because it's true.
So you kind of gestured toward this, but in the story, there's one of the killer quotes is in my mind at the time. This is Steinbach speaking. My mind at the time.
The head of national security at the FBI.
In my mind at the time, Clinton is likely to win. It's pretty apparent. So what happens after the election in November or December? How do we say to the American public, hey, we found some things that might be problematic, but we didn't tell you about it before you voted? The damage to our organization would have been irreparable. I'm wondering if the New York Times was thinking the same way.
Let me take two things. So first, I want to take the significance of that quote. So many people have said Jim Comey's acting as a political operative in making his decisions. We spent a lot of time on this, and I can say there's zero evidence that sort of the typical partisan politics, Republican Democrats, ever came up in these discussions about what to say, what not to say.
We would have led this. If that had been the case, that would have been the lead of that story. We would have been writing a news story.
Right, that's the story.
Yeah.
We didn't see anything. What we did see was the FBI was very, very attuned to Washington politics, which is not politics like who's good, like Republican, Democrat. It's more like, boy, if we are seen as sitting on these emails, Hillary wins, the Republicans take the Senate, we get accused of like sitting on this stuff to help her win. this hobbles our whole organization. We look like we covered up for the next president. It makes our credibility shot with the next Congress. It's going to make it hard to do any over it. I mean, to move forward. It's going to undercut the credibility of our agency. That's like the Washington politics that we're taking into consideration. Now, the FBI is not supposed to do that. The FBI is not supposed to take that stuff into consideration. And what Steinbach would say, what he did say is, you can argue that's not what we're supposed to do, but there's no rule book for what do you do 11 days before an election when you've got a bunch of new emails that you are concerned might change the outcome of an investigation that you previously declared closed.
And when they got the warrant for that computer, they said in the warrant, the agent swore that there was a probability they could find classified information on that computer. And in the end, they did find classified information. They found 13 email chains of classified information. It was information they had already seen, but they did find it on the computer.
So, to your second question, did the Times think she was going to win? Well, don't take my word for it. We put up like speedometers on election night saying she was going to win. So clearly, we thought she was going to win. But you know, that for our world, like we didn't care about that. Like I don't care. I mean, honestly, I don't care at all about politics. Like I don't find it interesting. I find it the worst part about living in DC. You know, the whole political. I find the campaign to be this sort of nauseating affair. So I mean, in my world, I just didn't care about that. In no way did it affect the coverage we were doing. And I would argue that some of the best, I would argue that we, the Times, not we, us, because I didn't do anything with this, the Trump accountability pieces we did, both on his taxes, on the collapse of his casinos, on,
women.
On women, we're second to none on the accountability piece. Now, you look at the Post, look at what David Fahrenthold did on his charities. There was accountability journalism being done on Donald Trump. Anybody who thinks that like Donald Trump got elected because the Times or the Post didn't do their sort of the vetting that they do for a candidate and spent too much time talking about Hillary Clinton, I mean, just is not reading the stories. The stories were done. And they were done not with an agenda. They weren't done to say, let's take down Trump. Just like the Clinton email stories were not done to take down Hillary. I mean, you do these stories because when somebody's running for president, they get vetting, and they get deep vetting by investigative journalists at major newspapers. So did I think he was going to win? Yeah, I mean, but did that affect me at all? No, not. And I don't think it affected the Times. Our coverage of, at least the investigative coverage. I can't speak for campaign coverage and staffing.
Did you? No. Did you learn anything? Obviously, you learned a lot of things over the course of the investigation that just came out yesterday. I mean, obviously, hindsight is 20/20 and all that. But what did you learn from doing this that changes the way you think about your own role in reporting in 2016 that you know now that you've finished this big story?
On what? Russia or the Hillary?
All of it, everything. All these things that were going on at the time. You now know, and thanks to you, we all now know far more about what was happening at that time than we knew then. But so you must be, as you're doing that reporting, you must be thinking about, well, this is the role that I was playing. This is how I was weaving between these different figures. These are the decisions that I was making at the time. Now you know much more of what the Matrix actually looked like. What do you think of what you did then? What do you think you might have done differently if you had more perfect
I mean, if we knew there was a counterintelligence investigation
We would have
of
reported
Donald
that.
Trump's campaign
If-
in collusion with Russia,
If I
we would have
knew,
reported that.
if I knew at that moment that in October when the Russians, leaked Podesta's email, that was the moment where the Russians weaponized the information they had taken to purposely damage Hillary Clinton. The only logic there, if there are two people in a race and you're damaging one, it can only help the other.
But you know, the coverage of the hacks, I mean, the coverage of the hacks, and the fact that they were Russian and that they were part of a Russian effort was extremely well covered by the Times. I mean, they just this isn't me bragging. Our very talented colleagues won a Pulitzer for their coverage of the Russian influence campaign in both the U.S. and Europe. Obviously what was missing was understanding the sort of the depth and contours of the investigation into the Trump campaign. The other thing I learned, from a personal standpoint, is we reported, Mike Schmidt and I reported in July of 2015 that the Inspector General had made this criminal referral to the Justice Department, to the FBI in relation to Hillary's.
You might remember that they took a lot of flack.
And I mean, we took, the sourcing on that was pretty good, and we just got like destroyed by it. And the Justice Department confirmed it, and then like the next morning they said, oh no, it was not a criminal referral, and sort of pulled the rug out from under us. And the significance of the fact that there was a criminal referral means there might actually become a criminal investigation. Like the possibility is that Hillary Clinton might be under investigation at some point in the future. When we wrote that story, she was already under investigation. But we didn't know that.
She had been under criminal investigation
2 weeks.
and her aides.
Yeah,
for
already.
2 weeks.
And it turns out that the way the Justice Department played that actually ticked off people at the FBI because they thought, look, here's political appointees at the Justice Department trying to give Clinton a talking point. So I felt like the thing I learned is just, we obviously only have a slice of this stuff.
And I wish I'd come back over the top of them and printed that it was a criminal investigation, and I knew it was. And the problem with that story and what happened was it made reporting that fact radioactive. And by the way, it could have been a lot worse for Hillary Clinton. But because of that, it was being downplayed as a security review. This was not a security review. As Comey said, and stood up there and talked to everybody, we are not going to recommend charges. In fact, they weren't going to prosecute Hillary Clinton or any of her aides of breaking federal laws, which could have sent them possibly to prison. And for me, that was very frustrating. And because of what happened, it wasn't until March of 2016 when I reported that one of the people involved in building the server had gotten immunity from the Justice Department, right? Why the hell do you get immunity from the Justice Department, right? So you're not prosecuted for a possible crime. And it wasn't until March of 2016, months and months and months after their story, where I finally put in the lead of this Washington Post story, it's a criminal investigation, right? And I don't think this served the voters well.
I think they were misled.
They were misled.
This wasn't a criminal investigation. When it was.
So I want to open it up to the audience, if any of you guys have questions.
So just as a casual observer, when BuzzFeed published the dossier, there was a lot of consternation. Why would we publish unverified things? How did your perspective on that? What was your perspective on that, given the fact that the nature of intelligence like this is so malleable?
I think,
I wouldn't.
yeah, I wouldn't have run it if I would not have put it out there like BuzzFeed put it out there. And I think we were trying to do the responsible thing the Times was. We were trying to figure out what was true in the dossier. And if we had come to a point where we felt that any of these accusations or the so-called intelligence reporting is true, we would have published it, right? But we would have published it piecemeal. I mean, we wouldn't have published the whole dossier. And look what happened with BuzzFeed. They're getting sued. They've had to apologize publicly to that individual, and that's never a good sign when you're a news organization publicly apologizing on threat of a lawsuit.
Yeah, I wouldn't have published it.
But the whole
reported the hell out of it.
The whole thing happened. I knew from when CNN reported that Clinton had briefed Trump on this dossier. At that very moment, Comey had briefed Trump on that dossier in New York. I knew at that very instant it was over, game over. That dossier is coming out. In fact, I turned to somebody. I said, "I'll bet you in 20 minutes somebody publishes that dossier." I think it was a little less actually, but CNN in its own way legitimized the dossier, and I'm not faulting this. Legitimized the dossier by saying the director had briefed the president, Trump, on this thing, and it created its own consequences.
Well, these are the stakes, and I guess they kind of always are. And this happened with the story that you were talking about in 2015 about the question of what kind of a referral it was. Is that a small mistake or getting out a little bit over your skis can create, to mix metaphors, a whole that, somebody who really wants to destroy the credibility of the press, such as the current president of the United States, can drive a truck through.
Or the Clinton campaign.
Or the Clinton
which is
campaign.
fantastic at that. I mean, look, had we been more precise, our lead would have been Hillary Clinton is under criminal investigation, right? That's not the lead they wanted, right? So, so them saying, well, it wasn't a criminal referral, it was a security referral, gives them just the veneer of a problem to let them just drive a Mack truck through. I mean, it's brilliant campaign.
These people are paid political assassins. I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats. They're out there to contain us, to try to cow us, and they're good at it.
And we should talk about the fact that we're coming off the end of, right, at this moment, we're coming off the end of an administration that was the worst administration for a free press since Richard Nixon.
They subpoenaed
the most aggressively anti-press president in generations that had, has sent prosecuted more people for talking to reporters than all of the previous administrations combined, that went after your sources, that went after you, that considered journalists to be co-conspirators for talking to people about national security. The chilling effect of the Obama White House is crackdown on reporters is something we're still feeling today, and everybody can get spun up about how Donald Trump is he's going after reporters and he's going to go after sources. Well, all he has to do is say, I'm just continuing the good work of my predecessor.
What Obama's Justice Department did, Matt and I in 2013, we reported on a bomb threat out of Yemen, and the Justice Department, Holder recused himself, but then Jim Cole, right? Cole, the Deputy Attorney General, authorized a subpoena to get our phone records.
3 months of our phone records.
3 months of our phone records, 20 lines.
And did it in secret, so we couldn't find it in court.
And we couldn't find it in court. Do you
Home
know the chilling effect of that is?
Work phone, our editor's home phone.
My desk in New York, I hadn't worked at in 3 years. His desk in Connecticut.
The main phone line to the AP, so everybody who calls in to the main phone line. The main phone line to our office on Capitol Hill, so everybody, all the congressmen and senators. I mean, the chilling effect that administration had on covering national security. So now people are like, oh, how come you didn't have better sources to tell you there's a Trump investigation? Well, maybe because you keep throwing people in jail. Sorry, I get a little worked up. No, raise his hand over here.
Okay. You said a very powerful phrase, I'm in it for the story. And, clearly I think your role as print journalist is to influence public opinion, but, or at least to inform public opinion. But my point is the other forms of media. So whatever, you publish, somebody like Chris Matthews on Nightline may be quoting you. So what is your awareness or your consciousness of how you have these ripple effects on other media?
It's great, and
great meaning your awareness.
Great meaning the awareness, and getting to a place like New York Times, you understand the power of its reporting, and I think all of us take that very very responsibly. And we have to be very careful and cautious when it comes to reporting these stories, because we understand the ripple effect. We understand they're going to be brought up in all the talk shows, morning, afternoon, and night, and it's relentless, and it's not going to end. And putting them aside, we always want to get the story right, and we endeavor to get every single detail right. And it's very, very difficult. And many times you read stories which we don't. I think we decide we're not going to publish certain information, and we pull back. We find ourselves, people don't realize, we find ourselves pulling back from information more often than you might think.
But my job is not to right wrongs. My job is not to decide, that the best candidate wins, or my job is not to make sure that I'm not here to change outcomes. I'm just not an outcomes-driven guy. I'm just not. I'm here to tell you what's happening, and if you want to be, at the end of the day, furious at Jim Comey, read the story and be furious. You want to say he made the right decision, read the story, say he made the right decision. I'm just not an outcomes guy, so I don't spend any time being oh man, if we put this on the front page, it could get Trump elected. That's just not, that's not in my, it's not something we ever talk in our pocket.
No, but we did, it's interesting, we had it on the Hillary Clinton, on the foundation investigation, and we felt, we had never ended up publishing what we knew about that investigation. The Wall Street Journal ended up doing a piece, and they covered it pretty thoroughly. But we were debating, like, we just can't throw a story out about the Hillary Clinton investigation until we know exactly, well, what are they looking at?
But that's not because we wanted Hillary.
No,
it's because it's like basic fairness.
It's basic fairness, but we also knew throwing this out in the middle of an election in October
Oh yeah, sure.
might not have been the most responsible thing to do if we didn't have all the facts and
Right.
clarity into what exactly they were investigating.
But that's the exact same thing about the letter, the Comey letter. You use the metaphor of smoke and fire, and you say that as a journalist you were responsible by stating in the article very clearly that like it's very unlikely that anything new will be revealed. But you put a lot of, I don't know if it was you in particular, but the publication that you write for put a lot of smoke on the front of the page. And that takes, and so here, but it does happen, but it's also like you create information and then that information has a life. And so to hear you say that in certain,
what would the option?
wait, hold on, Matt. When I hear you say in certain contexts the idea of putting out unfounded accusations that are just potential, but without the meat in it, is just very frustrating as someone frustrated with the outcome of the election to then deal. But I do hear the fact that Comey announced it would have been everywhere, and if you did not cover it, that
So
would
what I'm
have.
saying is like, it's one thing for us to go and dig up information that figure out that there's a preliminary investigation, anonymously figure out that there's a preliminary investigation going on into Hillary Clinton's foundation, the Clinton Family Foundation, based in New York. We don't totally know what the predicate is for that. We don't know
Could
what
be something they read in a book, the FBI.
So we don't know. It's not publicly known. Nothing. So then just like to float it out there on us, just sort of anonymously with no understanding of what's going on, would totally be irresponsible. Reporting on the FBI director sending a letter to Congress. How do you not do that? I mean, that's not like, the alternative would be what? Well, look, let's just put that on B12, wait and see what happens.
Let's put it inside the sports
If they
page.
find anything, we'll write about it.
Get back to it.
If they find anything, we'll write about it. And then what they find the emails that were deleted from the BlackBerry server, and they have something damning on them, and then we write about it. We're like, hey, listen, this happened a couple weeks ago. We didn't tell you about it. The FBI director, by the way, did send a letter to Congress. We didn't think that was important because we wanted to wait for it to check out. I mean, that's just not how,
We did, and
that's news. Like, we tell people what happened that day, and that's the biggest thing that happened that day for sure.
And we treat the candidates the same way. It's the same thing we did with Trump with this quote unquote Alpha Bank story, right? We wanted to get to the bottom of this Alpha Bank story before we put it in the newspaper and perhaps wrote a story that could be devastating to Donald Trump. We had to be fair to Trump there too, and we didn't fully understand what it was, and it would have been completely irresponsible.
And let me put one other thing. So there's a really high percentage chance that in any counterintelligence investigation, that nothing comes of it, right? That's just the way counterintelligence investigations work. When Jim Comey went in March to Capitol Hill and said, we are investigating members of the Trump campaign for possible collusions of Russia, should we not have put that on the front? Because that is the same thing as the Hillary, right? He told Congress, we're investigating members of the Trump campaign. Now, should we have been like, yeah, but we don't know if anything's going to come of that, and it probably won't because counterintelligence, so put that on B12. No, I mean, I can't imagine us doing that.
B12 sounds like just the worst.
Yeah, back by the tire ads.
Someone over there.
This is an open-ended question, and it's kind of a sad one. I remember the New York Times, might have been after the election, someone published an article that was like, the Republican horse race is over and journalism lost. So it's just something about the fact that, your guys' job, which I tremendously respect, of holding power accountable and trying to, present information to people who can read it or they don't have to, how do you get outside of the little circle of intelligent people who read the New York Times and agree with what you're saying and might have small disagreements, but you're not
like these opinions aren't reaching into like maybe some of the rural Trump voter base who like the sexual assault allegations that the New York Times covered weren't enough to like shake them, or people that just like you guys can report as things that are as true as you want them to be and have really credible sources, but it still won't affect someone's opinion. How do you fight that?
I think you don't fight it. I think the premise of your question is that what was lacking here was access to the information. And it isn't because people didn't know that Donald Trump was accused of, by these women of sexual impropriety. It isn't that Trump voters didn't know that his casinos tanked. It wasn't like, oh, because they're not subscribing to the Times, they didn't have access to that information. They didn't care. And my job is not to make you care. My job is to make sure you have access to the information. And so I don't lose sleep over the fact that, the wonderfully messy democracy we have, people took the information and made a choice about it. I don't think sort of Times journalists or any journalist should be taking that extra step and saying, no, guys, you shouldn't be voting for him because he's bad, get it? Because that's not our job, and that's frankly like not, I don't want reporters to start having views like that. I think that just changes the whole prism.
We do have an op-ed page for that.
We have an op-ed page for that. But I just fundamentally disagree that the point was that people who voted for Trump did so because they didn't have access to the information. I just don't. I don't buy that. And I also think it turns Trump voters into two-dimensional characters that isn't fair to them.
Yeah.
And I think it assumes like, oh, stupid Trump voter, you didn't have access to the New York Times. That's why you voted for Trump. And
Or the Washington Post, or the
I just
AP.
don't think it's. I think it's more complicated. And I think a lot of that is people who are upset with the outcome of the election who want to think that if only these people who voted for Trump just sort of understood my world, that it would have voted the way I. And I'm not saying you. I just think that's like I don't think it's a lack of information, lack of access to information.
I take your point about the Obama administration having a chilling effect on the media.
Yeah.
But now we have a president who regularly tweets that the media is fake and fake news, et cetera, et
They're
cetera.
calling us criminals.
So how's that made your life as investigative reporters? Has this made it more difficult, or in fact, do you have people coming out of the walls trying to give you stuff now because they're worried about the situation with the media or the access to information? How is your life post-inauguration?
My life post-inauguration, I'm finding there are many more people in government who are using encrypted forms of communication at a pace I've never seen before in my life. I don't think the fake news is disrupted.
Not like the leak investigation.
Yeah, not like the leak investigations. I mean, not at all. I mean, when people read about Adam Goldman, when people in the government read about the Justice Department labeling a reporter from Fox News a co-conspirator, as he was simply trying to gather information, getting a warrant, not only to look at his personal emails. An FBI agent said he's a co-conspirator, or getting our phone records. That to me, I look at Trump.
Subpoenaing people for a grand jury to identify their.
Almost throwing Jim Risen in prison for contempt because he refused to testify at a trial. We haven't seen that yet. Maybe we get down there, but I'll give Trump the benefit of doubt. Okay, I think there's a lot of
the worst thing he's done. The worst thing he's done is, well, listen. I mean, from where I sit, I'm coming off of a president who has threatened to throw our colleagues in jail, who has taken my phone records, who has put sources in prison, and this guy's on Twitter saying you're fake news. I'll take the guy who's saying you're fake news.
rather than someone subpoenaing our phone records.
As somebody who does journalism, it is the chilling effect of the worst oppressive administration on a free press since Richard Nixon is far worse than Donald Trump saying we're fake news. That is a fact.
That may have been, but he his channels that were available to him because he was a very private person.
Who was?
Who was it?
Obama.
Well, this wasn't about Obama's privacy. Obama thought, the Obama administration thought it was one thing if we are telling you classified information. It's another thing if people are telling you classified information about stuff that embarrasses you. One of the stories that got us in a pickle, they asked us to hold off writing something for national security reasons. We did, and then they said, could you hold off for just 24 more hours because the president would really like to be the one to announce that. And we said, no, that's ridiculous. We're running the story. And then they subpoenaed our phone records. So I have zero, you get nowhere with me on this one.
Do you think that this is true across beats? It sounds like a lot of the things that you're talking about are specific to people who are reporting on the intelligence.
Well, it's specific to leaks of classified information. I mean, that's-
But the chill.
Yeah.
What about WikiLeaks? What about Trump preparing charges for WikiLeaks?
Well, I mean, I wrote a story on that too. I think preparing charges is a stretch, and I think that what I'm hearing, in fact, is that there's a real debate going on among career federal prosecutors about trying to charge Assange with espionage because of the effect it could have on media outlets, right? Because we are third parties collecting secret information about the government and publishing it. That's what WikiLeaks is doing. And if you're going to go after Assange and you're going to make that assertion, so what's the next step? Well, the next logical step is, hey, well, why should the media be allowed to do that, right? I mean, there are no federal, there's a First Amendment, but there's no federal statute. There are no federal protections for journalists. This is sort of a, how would you describe it? An agreement.
Well, yeah, WikiLeaks is a fascinating case, and I don't know what. Because on the one hand, if I want to leak information, if I'm an insider, if I'm a Russian operative inside the U.S. government, right? I don't need to pass my information to a Russian spy. I can just pass it to WikiLeaks, and then you've done the damage to the U.S. Right? So that's like classical spy versus spy stuff. But yet, if you see something wrong inside the government, you might want to leak to WikiLeaks or the New York Times or whatever. But in the end, it's the same act. And so, you know, there's something very scary about the idea of prosecuting WikiLeaks for that. But I'm very sympathetic to the idea that somebody who hacked into the DNC, Russian operatives hacked into the DNC, got a bunch of embarrassing stuff about the Democrats, and released it through WikiLeaks to steer the U.S. Election. I'm very sympathetic to the idea that there should be something we can do about that. But
We wrote about it.
I know, but I'm scared.
We helped weaponize Putin.
I know, I'm scared. The idea of prosecuting is scary, and I don't know what that brings.
It's complicated, right? Because I mean, WikiLeaks isn't, as you guys have sort of been implying, and I agree. Like WikiLeaks aren't. Julian Assange isn't
Not a journalist.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking too much.
As a theoretical question, what might you have done had that leak, that the Russian leak, been presented to you?
Which one?
The Podesta email leaks that were leaked through
somebody
the United
came to us,
States came through.
stolen emails.
Well, what happens, WikiLeaks in a manner is behaving as an agent of a foreign
I kind of can't imagine us, if somebody just come to us with a CD full of stolen emails, I kind of don't think we would ever.
Yeah,
I mean, I have a hard time imagining if somebody just mailed us a CD of.
You'd have looked at it.
The point I raised.
Yeah, I mean, we would have called our lawyers. No, I'm serious. No, I'm serious. Like,
no doubt.
We would have called the Times lawyers and said, what do we do with this? You know, what do we do? You put the CD and you open it up and then you see it's somebody's personal emails. I don't know what we would have done.
Had you gotten a second source and demonstrated that it was accurate, you might then have published it?
It wouldn't have been, for me, it wouldn't have been an issue if it was accurate. It would have been, somebody stole somebody's emails and sent them.
yeah, these are private.
You know, I think it might have been different. If somebody inside the institution with like access to the emails had
Leaked a certain
leaked
amount of
this-
emails, like the one about Bernie Sanders.
Right.
or-
I mean, had leaked these things. I think that's a different I would think that is differently than if somebody who hacks in, breaks the law.
Of course, the government makes the same argument, this is stolen property.
Right. It's
This is stolen. When somebody leaks Snowden, or somebody else leaks, or WikiLeaks leaks this information, the government asserts it's stolen property. And one of the charges that Assange could face is theft of government property.
It's a sketchy, dirty business.
Exactly.
It is. It's tough.
So we'll say we make decisions on a case-by-case basis.
I would say we would talk to our lawyers.
Just to follow up,
Yeah.
the New York Times did publish material from the Sony hacks, and there were emails leaked then, and obviously, I mean, there's pressure given that lots of people have
Oh
that
yeah,
information.
listen, it's a
but-
totally like wussy-ass defense, right? Like, we didn't go first, right? But I do think there is a somewhat different, and I didn't cover the Sony stuff, but there's a little bit different between saying like, I am reporting that this information has been dumped out to the public and is now in the public domain and is influencing like public discussions, versus like, I am the one making this information public, right?
So in the case the emails came to you and you alone, you wouldn't publish. But if
I
you
think
knew
it
that
would
other
be
people
hard.
had the emails-
I think it would be hard for me if somebody just gave me. Certainly, if I knew they were stolen, I think it would be very hard for me to imagine doing that. Right? But and it's not that.
I disagree. I think if somebody came to us with these Sony emails.
Sony emails?
The Sony emails, we probably would have.
But the Times didn't. But the Times didn't report it. The Times was very weird about it. The Times didn't, and I wasn't there for that. The Times on the Sony emails was, we're not reporting on these unless we're going to report only on what's been reported elsewhere, because it was stolen property.
They did eventually. I mean,
Yeah,
the idea that stuff would only come to you seems a little bit.
No, I'm acknowledging that this is like, we're a little bit uncharted territory here, because when we're dealing with stolen stuff, it's not like when somebody walks out of a government building and you say, well, this is government property, you know, this belongs to all of us. When you're talking about somebody's private stuff that's been stolen. No, I mean, listen. So it's not entirely. I wouldn't go and videotape. I wouldn't surreptitiously videotape, somebody in their home, right? But like, I would report on, a scandalous video, caught where somebody punches, the Ray Rice punches his wife in the elevator. I wouldn't set up that tape, right? Like, I wouldn't, but I would report it on the fact that it was now all over the internet and people were, and I would do that. You see what I mean? Like, it's one thing.
Yeah, I just think that there also is an issue of like public concern with regards to part of the stuff that came out in the Podesta emails that was discussed was Podesta as being mean to people, and people are saying mean things about people. But the same thing in the Sony emails.
Well, you can't have both ways. You can't say you shouldn't run on it because it's stolen and also wasn't newsworthy, right? I mean, you got to pick.
Compared to the Ray Rice thing, right? There's a broader issue there about domestic violence in the NFL, right? So if you're making the distinction there, right, you could argue that in one case there's a broader issue about.
Well, I'm just talking about, forget like the level of newsworthiness. We can argue newsworthiness. But just in the ability of like, I don't see a huge distinction between, I won't be the one creating the public product, but I will absolutely report on what is in the public.
Because we don't steal that.
They don't steal. They don't steal stuff.
I want to hear Jason's discussion.
So you were making this distinction earlier between what the FBI was concerned about with partisan politics and Washington politics. And I guess I feel like you can't quite disentangle them as neatly as you have, in the sense that partisan politics shape Washington politics. And it seemed like in your piece, one sort of theme that was running through it and running through a lot of the discussion of Comey was this fear that if Hillary won, you'd have Republican investigations, you'd have this entire media apparatus that would discover that the investigation had been reopened, and that would be a scandal. Did he have the same fear about if Trump won, that scandal would arise from the Democrats? Or, I mean, because you had Obama trying to tamp him down and not let him run the op-ed.
That's actually a great question.
And yeah, I'm just sort of wondering, like, what was his thinking there? Was he just not worried that the Democrats would make a stink? Or was it just, it wasn't likely Trump was going to win?
I don't think, in any of our reporting, I don't ever come across something where they ever even considered talking about the Trump investigation. Like, I don't think that was ever even on the table. And it was done, the Trump investigation was done totally by the book. We just don't talk about it. We keep it secret.
Even when you wrote that letter, it didn't?
No, we don't talk about classified investigations. We don't talk about ongoing investigations. The problem with the October decision with Comey is he'd gone so far off the reservation in July, and then he testifies for it. He sort of creates all of these built-in problems where he's announced publicly the case is closed. And so he's caused that problem for himself. So that's why I say it's politics, the politics of the city, not because he wants Hillary to win or I'm a Republican, so I'm going to do this. Just he's created this mess for himself.
But he seemed to be very scared of what would happen if
he's
people
afraid of damage. The FBI is very, he's very, it's, the people in the FBI have the saying. Their number one rule is don't embarrass the FBI, right? If you work at the FBI, they're very brand conscious. So is the CIA, and so are other federal agencies. I mean, it's fair to ask, was he too concerned about that, right?
Well, we're not being necessarily too concerned about damaging the FBI as much as Republicans were able to create the fear in him that we will have the means to pursue this, and we will pursue this, and we will not let this go, and we will damage the FBI. Whereas Democrats, for whatever reason, didn't necessarily strike that fear in him.
Well, the Democrats didn't have the Democrats didn't have Congress, right?
No, and that's a
right.
big
So
reality.
that's why I say it's Washington politics,
Yeah.
not Republican. I mean, not party politics. I think if the Democrats had Congress, and listen, the day that they're making the decision on whether to send a letter, Jason Chaffetz is saying, I have years of hearings teed up on Hillary Clinton for when she wins.
I mean, Comey wasn't going to win. Let's just imagine that it wasn't. Comey was not going to win Comey, the director of the FBI, is not going to win in any scenario.
There's no outcome.
Listen. Imagine if there wasn't a Hillary Clinton investigation and her mishandling of emails, right? Imagine that there wasn't, but there was a Russian CIA investigation, and we don't learn about that until after the election and Trump wins. I mean, he was still going to be heavily criticized. You're going to still have that same anger is going to be there. That why wasn't the public informed?
But Trump wasn't going to win.
But Trump wasn't going to win.
That's what it is.
What can you tell us about the status of the investigation going forward, the Trump-Russian connections, and your degree of confidence that it's proceeding aggressively?
Which? The FBI, the Congress?
Kit and caboodle.
Well, I mean, just today there were a couple of stories, and we heard it too, that the Congress investigations aren't going as well as they hoped. I mean, we saw what happened with Nunes and the House, and so I mean that thing was a total fiasco. And on the Senate side, I think Senator Warner, who's in the minority, said that he was concerned about the pace of the investigation. I think it's a priority for the FBI. I think they want to get to the bottom of this, and despite what they say, I think at the end they find themselves in the same box as Hillary, right? They're going to get to the investigation, and it's quote unquote closed. They're going to have to say something to the American public. What?
They're
going to have to say they've set this precedent, and they're going to have to tell the American public that none of this washed out, or we'll never be sure. That's sort of my feeling of this Bible. Like, it's so murky, right? And I've heard this from people, because the media started reporting this early on, right? In September, some of this started leaking out about possible collusion, that anybody was in fact engaged, if anybody was in fact colluding with the Russians, they'd probably change their behavior now.
And I think,
right?
look, we've reported that there's a criminal investigation involving Manafort ongoing.
Not a criminal investigation.
A criminal, like a foreign corrupt practices and whatnot. So look, those can proceed, right? But look, nothing we've heard gives us any indication that Donald Trump is under investigation. So if they spend months and they pick up a couple people from the campaign, right? I don't think that has a major change, depending on obviously what the charges are and what's in there.
These CI cases are extraordinarily difficult to prosecute. Typically when the FBI do prosecute people under the espionage statute, whatever crime that they might choose to go after them with, the people don't know they're under investigation, right? So they're just sort of quietly going about their way, not knowing the FBI is watching them. In this instance, the primary suspects, right, the people the media has reported, right, Page and Manafort, they've been written about, right? So the FBI is going to have a very difficult time trying to prove anybody colluded with the Russian government. And in most of these cases, they catch them in the act, right? That's how you really know someone. You catch them in the act.
I think we have time for one more, but
Just going back to your last point, is there a document or a piece of evidence that would kind of unlock this story, maybe before it was publicized that the FBI was looking into them?
What do you mean? If we had
Yeah, I mean, if you guys have a wish list of something like a document or something out there that's floating around.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the same document that there was a document in the Hillary case, the Hillary Clinton, that the FBI released under the Freedom of Information Act. It laid out how this investigation started and what they were doing. It was dated July to July 10th, 2015, right? I wish I had that. Yes, I wish I had the same document regarding the Trump.
But we just don't get those.
Yeah, we don't get those.
We get those documents at the end, and that's the problem.
We might never. They might. I mean, the FBI could conceivably say that it's classified, or this. I mean, they might not. This investigation could go on for years. It really could. It could go on for years, and they might not know what really happened until 10 years from now. Somebody working for the Russian SVR, FSB, decides they're done with Putin, and they walk in, and they have somebody tell them what happened. I mean, that's typically how it happens.
So I'll let you guys write the kicker on your own talk. Is there a final thought that you would like people to take home to the North Carolina flood?
I mean, this has been fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys very much.